Chapter 2. Flashbacks. Ebony found himself looking back on his memories this morning. Flashbacks which included what he thought was an affair that was brewing with his friend and then his new lover, Emissary. He had doubted her to be worth dissolving his business investment with Locust and choose to see past Locust's flirtation. He was going to be away, miles away, and Emissary was going to be staying in the same city with Lotus again. Deja vu. To some previous mischief he came home early to find. That was many months ago, a lot sex ago, and the punishment he put down to make Emissary believe he wasn't going to allow the plays another man was going to throw at her. Ebony wasn't bluffing about his talents. If he said it, whispered it, which he was very forward in doing, he did it. Ebony had come back to the studio a month early from one of Lotus' setups abroad. Again, Emissary had come to see Ebony off, to invest in her private life with a handsome man more like. Ebony, newly in love, ended his trip abroad a month early, thinking he was going to stop briefly in the city then fly out to Emissary. The studio was Ebony's first stop before heading to his place where he found Lotus and Emissary. Emissary hadn't mentioned that she was working on some contract with Lotus, who had been getting in some chuckle time. He had been getting to know Emissary, including dinner at the studio which Ebony walked in on. Ebony hadn't expected his close friend to be hanging out with his lover. It looked questionable when he entered a dark studio. Unannounced, he slowed the pace and watched, listening at a distance. Flirtation going back and forth. Ebony was waiting to see if it was going to go further, the secret that he was the last to know. Ebony watched in the candlelight, then turned and exited the studio. He headed for his place where he thought Emissary had left and returned home. Unbeknownst to Ebony, Emissary had decided to stay in the city, where it was obvious things had been going on with Lotus. Ebony thought to himself while waiting for Emissary to wrap up what he was going to do in response to his disappointment, yet interest as to what the hell was going. Ebony had decided not to overreact. He still waited to surprise Emissary. He took a long shower. Ebony was lounging in his best suit, naked in the shadows around his condo, when Emissary came in from the studio. Ebony did want to be noticed and allowed for Emissary to move around as she had intended without interruption. Quietly, Ebony followed Emissary throughout his home, a questioning look on his face, knowing where to hide not to be noticed until Emissary declothed and started a shower. Behind the glass doors he watched as she went underneath the showerhead, blinded by the downpour of water. Ebony walked into the glass shower enclosure, quietly unlocking the door. He put both hands around Emissary's breast and leaned into her neck to talk into her ear. "What are you doing here? Don't answer. It's better if we talk after I fuck your brains out. Isn't that what should happen if a burglar is in your home? Should I shoot? Don't answer." Quietly, Ebony dimmed the lights more in the bath and turned the water down, where he began his investigation, moving his hands under the running water across Emissary's body from her breast down her stomach, squeezing her, then holding her labia, vagina, firmly in his hand before he spoke. "Don't say anything." Aroused, Ebony spoke with a serious face, yet smiling at Emissary, still having a rush of emotions and hopefully room for understanding as to what was going on while he had been away. Why had Emissary been secretive about her stay, yet alone she had been staying in his home? Ebony's thoughts had continued while he sat waiting in the nude on Emissary. "She's staying in my home and having an affair with my best friend," his initial thoughts. Now that Ebony had disclosed to Emissary, he was home in the most gratifying way. It had been played around in his home like a shadow, then the spontaneous sex that began in the shower back to his bed, but he needed more answers other than sex. Ebony began, "Like I was saying, what are you doing in my home? Better yet, what were you doing with Lotus?" Emissary asked Ebony. "How did you know I had been out with Lotus tonight?" "It is of no consequence how I know, it does not matter." "Does that give you more time to gather your thoughts while answering with a question?" Ebony. "Emissary, I grew to be very serious with you. You are the only woman who's been in my bed for months." It's disturbing that I am feeling these feelings and questioning why you would be out with Lotus. He too is in a relationship with your friend. How do you two find the time not to let your lovers know that you two are working on bettering your rapport with one another? Emissary, tell me it's nothing like that? Ebony. Emissary, exhausted from sex, looked at Ebony and told him, it's nothing like that. Ebony. Then you won't be disappointed. He started kissing on Emissary more. They continued to have sex. Ebony was more aggressive than usual. Lotus comes over. The next day Ebony had not disavowed to follow up on what was going on with Lotus and Emissary, and he told Emissary not to tell Lotus he was back in the city and that he would go see him in person. Ebony then called his contact on his contract liaison between Lotus, Ebony, and told them not to tell Lotus that he had flown back to the US. Ebony told Emissary that they were still going back to her place and to book them a flight. It was short of becoming a confrontation the night before, but Ebony considered that it was not only his private life, his bed, but his business, his career that Lotus was in a manipulating position. Ebony was not going to allow for secrets to threaten him at home, and he had decided to talk to Lotus within the next day or so and let things ride for a minute. Expectations that had preceded his trip, expectations good or bad, thoughts had to be calmed, and he wanted to see where Lotus' head was at despite what Emissary had said. The whole mystery behind why she had been being secretive about staying in the city hadn't been discussed. Emissary hadn't yet presented her reasons as to why she'd been staying in the city, his home. He knew of no contract or needed her attention in person. The opportunity presented itself sooner than later. Lotus showed up at Ebony's condo in the city within the next couple of days. To Lotus' surprise, as it showed on his face, Ebony answered the door. Come in. Lotus began with small talk as to how unexpected it was to see him back so soon and why. Was everything okay? Ebony had his back to Lotus but then turned smiled. After all, he had settled the matter with Emissary before. Ebony then looked at Lotus and asked him how things were with Star. Lotus replied that things were well. Ebony then asked Lotus as he walked up to him, leaned into his ear. Why were you at the studio so late with my woman rather than making use of the studio with Star? There's no room for another man in Emissary's bed other than me. With that being said, Lotus looked shocked even more. Ebony had decided not to tell either one of them that he had stopped by the studio and saw things with his own eyes, things that looked shady. There was too much studio atmosphere and equipment, mainly Emissary being there in candlelight with Lotus, that Ebony did not like. Lotus shut down, de-escalated the matter and told Ebony that he understood. Ebony did not let go of the conversation topic. Lotus, you are attracted to Emissary. Lotus replied, yes. Ebony looked at him. Lotus, without continuing the conversation, handed Ebony an envelope. Make sure Emissary gets this. Then Lotus told Ebony he'd see himself out. It was understood that that was the end of it. Ebony had the looks, the clout, connections, both social capital and capital revenue to sweep any woman off her feet, which he had been doing with Emissary, back and forth across the country, home and abroad, making her look even better, landing more than contract deals. Emissary was talented, her own history, and she had fallen in love with the perfect idea of everything being in sync, the business, the soulmate lover who understood her lifestyle, her career objective, and most of all, he cared about everything she had invested. The nonsense with Lotus was nothing he was going to entertain a moment more after last night. Another spontaneity that was the icing on the cake. Nah, I'm not trying to hear that, is exactly what his thoughts were. Thanks. Chapter 4. Here it was presenting itself again, whether it was the affair brewing with Asturias or not. Deja vu was all over the place. Ebony had decided to follow through and go abroad in the campaign for fame and sparkle denim. Asturias was brewing her own ideas of fame. When the waters are clear, it's smooth sailing, but there's chaos amongst pirates, the course is off track, and there's no honor amongst thieves. Queel has set up a disaster using the bait and hook of a pair of long legs that can't wait to wrap around Ebony's torso if she gets him alone. Queel was ready to get more footage and his 2 leading soap opera characters he had already cast. It was easy for Queel. Somehow what motivated him was worth more than some allegiance between the sheets of his lovers. Astacares had climbed into bed with trouble when she met Queel, a hustler, sneaky and a professional about that life of the grip, lack for a better play on words. Queel was gripping more than his camera equipment and his thirst for money. A grip on Astacaris' mind and ass evidently had gotten her intertwined in an affair of hearts. These two, Queel and Astacaris, now were entering the realm of intercontinental power plays, international lovers for the currency exchange. The campaign with Sparkle and Fame Denim was Astacaris' ticket out, but where was she going to go? Solo with her winnings standing beside the lead, or was she going to continue to be the cohort with her lover for greater leprechaun days now that she was lucky in her chance at being somewhere over the rainbow in an Ebony's bed abroad? Astacaris had come on board as a friend of Queel in on the hustle ticket, riding through the gates after Queel's independent days with her were agreeably bringing in less than needed for their appetites. Queel and Astacaris both had the mentality that sex could be used to advance themselves professionally, either of them having a professional date that brought about resources. It was at a casting call for porn. Both Astacaris and Queel had hooked up during his early college days before the internship was offered to him, and they are in that period of time that he and Astacaris launched their own indie productions. Secrets left behind when they found the internship was going to present the opportunities to not only meet a top model but also work at a studio branded with the reputation set at international standards. Queel did have merit in his rank, but his ambition did not met his pockets just yet as he blueprinted a scandal he'd hoped would set fire to his powder keg of ideas. Astacaris brought along perks that he was enjoying. At this moment I am filled with so much that you have only to know me yet to find me waiting to return your touch. For eternity, I have promised myself there will always be your love in my heart. It bestows its beautiful strength under the heavy toll. When darkness moves and finds its path to you, there remains what's been untouched. Time unpassed where it left us, you won't be alone ever. Even in the shadows of false light, you won't have to say those words. In the absence of my embrace, I wait until it's your face. You have received me, and delivered to us our union in promises as I promised to you. Time has wounded the passion but not dwindled the flame. You won't ever be alone. You won't find there lacks words enough to prove to you a promise is true. You have only to know me, yet to find me waiting for your return. 5 hours of your pleasure tease. We bend the edges, turn the pages, hide the remorse of verses that creep up on us in the day. Just over the top I peek and look away from the dirty lines and frigid nervous proposals to enter the night alone through my glasses, with my stand-up stockings up, made up and a breeze on my ass left from just teasing looks and body talk. You didn't act on and left me lonely, so I took it home and pondered about it. I came up with a few ringers, a few answers of my own conclusions that concluded what you started. The teaser left me on a trail like the movie The Hitchhiker, catching the breeze of yore. And sexy, so I wiped my top lip with my index finger across the plane of my thoughts. Maybe it could happen, so what? It lingered, it was just the ride, a hitchhiker, right? Me or you, the top I peek and look away. Jocelyn Shaw, heat wrapped around the airy-legged night. The turmoils of bare and empty loneliness warmed her bosom, opening her eyes into a darkness across the room. Remaining inside was what lit the room enough only to be gentled by the flicker of burning on into the night. The shades caught the breeze, lifting each one on a slight wave up and down. As the morning introduced, she opened the flower of the collar and chased her feminine scarf of a woman's neckline with the close of his fantasies or remembrances of the last time a woman untied his tie with Dante hands of femininity, nights before his Chapter 2, No Clothes. Queel wasn't working alone, unbeknownst to Astacaris. It wasn't a Bonnie and Clyde hustle about to happen. Queel's security lay with his fellowship with several other players in the game he had paid out between Lotus, Ebony, Emissary and Astacaris. Queel excused himself for a moment, leaving Emissary in the front room to take a phone. On the other end of the phone, a deep, heavy masculine voice asked Queel if Emissary was in the front room. Yes, replied Queel. Queel was instructed to stay in the back room while room service stopped by the room. Queel was also asked if he was planning to set the next stage into motion, sleeping with Emissary in the near future, or did they have to wait much longer at launching the conflict targeted towards Ebony. Lastly, Queel was told the cameras had been put in place. Queel hung up the phone. Moving ahead quicker than Queel had desired to was not a bad idea, but he had planned on playing a little while longer with teasers between he and Emissary just to see if she'd relinquish any interest towards him genuinely. Room service rang the buzzer at the door and Emissary opened the door, whereas the gentleman posed to be an employee, a room attendant, of the hotel was delivering a gift basket of edibles to a wedding party. Emissary stated that there wasn't a wedding party in the suite, and the room attendant stated he would leave the gift anyway as compliments of their stay and apology for interrupting them. As Emissary accepted the basket in her arms, the young man removed a small distraction for Ebony before Emissary and Ebony could rekindle the moment where they had left off before Ebony had left for the job. Queel liked what he saw and was impressed with Emissary's bold attire and attention-getting methods in her personal affairs, as he stated to himself, "Indeed, very well indeed." Queel couldn't help holding onto the image of Emissary in the sheer jumpsuit. A beautiful woman. Yes indeed, he repeated again in his thoughts. Queel had been around beautiful women throughout his early launch of his career portfolio. Aspirations to gather captivating models who worked well with his camera and directions, many whom he slept with as well. It was not long before Queel and Emissary arrived at the studio. Chapter 3. Unbelievable. Astakares had decided not to stay in the studio loft and had gone to Queel's condo after talking to Ebony. The studio was empty, and Queel saw this as another opportunity to get close to Emissary, being as helpful as he possibly could. The spy cameras were still in place in the studio, and Queel made very little haste in turning them back on to continue collecting his footage. As Emissary got situated in the loft in the back of the studio, she called Ebony to let him know she was at the studio and there had been a change in the plan to meet him, of which he replied that he gathered that there was a change in plans and he had began to worry about her. Ebony told Emissary he would hurry over to the studio. Queel made his move, pretending to check up on his equipment in the studio, but he was setting up a shoot and then asked Emissary if she would join him on the set. Emissary replied that she hadn't been on a set for a photo shoot in quite some time, but allowed Queel's charm to woo her onto the set. "Queel, would you feel comfortable in just the sheer jumpsuit you're wearing under your overcoat? We're adults. It's just that you have a beautiful body and face I'd like to capture. Only a professional gesture between us," continued Queel. Emissary replied, "Queel, I'm not uncomfortable. I've modeled nude in my early days myself." Queel, no disrespect, a compliment. Emissary removed her overcoat wrap and Queel began snapping photos. It was only a short while into the photo shoot by the time they began before Ebony was coming through the door. He too was impressed and liked what Emissary was wearing. "Are we considering getting back in front of the camera? Does Lotus and Queel have more to handle?" commented Ebony as he smiled and walked closer to the set. More to handle is exactly what Queel had been calculating through the lens as he continued his secret life in the paparazzi photo and video side hustle. Ebony was very liberal and did not give a thought as most men of it being disrespectful. After all, the woman he had been laying with was standing in front of the camera wearing a sheer jumpsuit with nothing underneath. After all, it was for him was his thoughts, and he was right. Ebony asked to see the digital photos in the camera that Queel had been snapping to put in the lightbox. The three appeared to have felt very comfortable amongst one another. Soon the three became one as Ebony and Emissary went into the loft behind the studio and told him they'd catch up with him after they settled in for the day. Queel contacted Lotus to tell him of the plans, then headed to meet Astakares at his condo. Astakares was eager to find out more about Emissary, who was to be the other woman in her life who Ebony would be in constant contact with during their campaign. Asticares did not have reservation at being satisfied by Ebony and Queel, as she very well intended to continue being Queel's cohort as well as his sexual partner through their hustle and double life in the studio. Star, Ebony, Emissary, Character Profiles, Couple 1, Ebony, the model, Emissary, the photographer. Couple 2, Star, the actress, Emissary's client, Stooge, Star's alter ego, Lotus, Star's lover, business manager Ebony's manager, Queel, photographer. Queel has been introduced as Lotus' partner at the studio owned by Emissary, who's had her share in the limelight not only as a former part-time model, a manager, Star's acting career co-manager with Lotus, but also loved the art of photography and helping upcoming photographers through an intern program so much she invested in owning a loft studio that Lotus managed along with setting up jobs for Ebony. Queel was in quite the insider position and had gotten briefed well on Ebony and Emissary while coming on board with Lotus. If you recall, Lotus is quite a businessman, Ebony's friend, and he also co-managed Ebony's career. The friendly circle had advanced them all in their careers with so much in common. Queel had come in, a younger photographer with very high aspirations. Right now Queel was aspiring to acquire Emissary's studio and the reputation that went along with it not only in the city but its international connections. Lotus and Star had some in-between time away from the others they had taken up as honeymooners before the actual wedding day. Before the actual engagement, they were basking in their newfound chemistry laid up at Lotus condos secluded in a suburb off the city line. The studio had made for a great loft for both couples to get into bed with their ideas as well as relax close to the clock hours they were putting in towards their portfolios. Sparkle and Fame Denim was a huge contract that all were in on, somewhat of a family affair, for lack of better words. Lotus had made it home not too long before Queel was calling that morning to follow up with Lotus that Emissary had made it in from her flight. Lotus congratulated Queel, telling him that he was going to be a great partner in the deal going down with Sparkle and Fame Denim if he played his cards right. Ironically, Queel had set his hand of cards into motion already. Lotus told Queel that the last day at the shoot went well and he would be discussing contract details with them all over the next week towards plans to take things abroad. Before hanging up with Queel, Lotus asked about Asticares insofar as how they were managing their guest living arrangements, so as he was unaware that Queel and Asticares had known one another longer than Queel had let be known. Lotus was under the impression had began although she was a professional for many years in front and behind the scenes on a photo set. Emissary had a strange sense that something strange was going on but had no idea that her lover had embarked on treading water with another woman. Emissary also felt a deeper admiration from Queel and was flabbergasted. She recalled that she felt herself blushing on the set this morning. Queel, a younger man, was entering her professional life, but there was a personal connection. Without words they had flirted with one another behind the eye of the camera, as well as the lure of revealing attire Emissary knew had caught Queel's own eyes. Flirtation they both felt. Ebony also had a second consideration of the photo shoot and asked Emissary how did it come to her being the model on set opposed to their agenda, possibly his own guilt surfacing as well, feeling the need to bring up the chemistry he walked in on at the studio. Ebony left the topic aside and caressed Emissary, still wearing barely anything. Unzipping the sheer bodysuit became the focus rather than chatter concerning Queel. All that was shut down with hush pillow talk. Queel called Lotus to check in just as he was arriving at his loft. Share Asticares had already been enjoying the mischief she and Queel had orchestrated. She had been reviewing photos in Queel's digital camera quite comfortable. Asticares was standing in the living room when Queel entered his high security loft. He smiled as the electronic door slid to the side, revealing the invitation waiting for him. Upon the offer, Queel proceeded to carry through, taking things into his bedroom where they remained for the next several hours. Not before though. I should envy him, you know? Heading away on a private, All expenses paid gig with you along with the rewards perks, pre-qualified from what I could tell. Huh, Astakares, remarked Queel in a quiet almost whisper as he ran his finger and hand up Astakares' stomach and across her breast as they lay on the bed. Astakares replied, all of your arrangement to get in bed with a fortune. I feel like I've been cast in your Macbeth scandal just awaiting some devious end to come too early, but I was already seduced by your craftiness, Queel. Quite an insider pair of hands you have. Astakares smiled and continued the conversation with a question. How about you? I'm sure you have some plans for emissary. Queel replied, nothing. You haven't been acquainted with Astakares, as he continued the foreplay, now completely just as bare as his counterpart. He extended his hand to Astakares, pulling her towards him across the bed. Come here. We are due to reaffirm. Let's say a bit of allegiance. Queel then embraced Astakares from behind after turning her onto her stomach on the bed rather roughly. Queel's cell phone rang while he was turning off the shower, and he answered his phone while in the bathroom. What was that? Queel was referring to the early morning fainting spell with emissary. That's not exactly what we had planned for Queel, but just to take some precautionary measures, we now have some incriminating video that might cause Ebony to rethink his lady love here insofar as this oh so lovey-dovey ficid that's been going on. I'd say your footage of Ebony is of no less quality, asked the voice on the other end of the call. Yes. I will say Astakares helped to bring out the quality acting we want to see out of Ebony while he's juggling two women. I did sense something different about his attitude while he was trying to keep his erected moment quiet, or rather the shock to his dome that Astakares was being as forward while two other men were there. The caller continued, you evidently have your women to handle along with keeping to the plans, Queel. Do not let them get ahead of you. Stick to the agenda, Queel, and the less interference we'll have to deliver insofar as updating or recomposing this wonderful mastermind of parallel duets you have going on. I see everybody is in bed with the idea. The caller ended the call. Jacuzzi sex leaves a lot on the mind. That's exactly what had been going on. Ebony headed for the shower and asked emissary to join him. She did, and they continued a very sensual shower. Ebony headed for the shower and asked emissary to join him. Quite frankly, she did, and they continued a very sensual shower. As if emissary finished Ebony's thoughts, the shower and bath accommodated a jacuzzi that the two migrated over towards, where the next hour found the jacuzzi occupied and the perfect sitting for after-sex conversation. E-flat leaned back and emissary continued to massage him as they opened up about the plans ahead of them once more. Emissary sat straddling Ebony and began, you know I'm going to miss this, right? I might have to fly there in behind you, not only to get a sneak peek but some exciting new atmosphere, as always romantic. Ebony, smiling yet delivering a very serious look, just stared at emissary. He had a lot on his mind indeed, the beginning of an affair that he somewhat had been coerced into, as he later thought that perhaps it was not worth the turmoil. Yeah, after sex with emissary. Great sex. This is the part where we normally hear from Stooge had it been Star and Locust. Yeah, great sex and a ring, and a car, some more shopping, and some more shopping to put the cherry on the top of guilt. That is how that Sunday you were orchestrating with so much talent was served, right? But this was not them. Stooge was not there to interpret it on the sidelines as to how to proceed as she did at the studio. Ebony was going to have to come up with some combative strategy or cowered into instinctive masculine to female attraction topped with Astakares's ass, aggressive sexuality, and it was quite the Sunday. Real natural Ebony had put in work for the last couple days. He carried emissary back to the bed where they both got under the covers, but Ebony, for the first time throughout his intimacy with emissary, was thinking of another woman later on that night. But it wasn't sex. Featured Unpromised Seduction by Jocelyn Shaw, the unpromised hands, that carried with them only the remorse that the lover's touch had ended or the climax hadn't lasted long into past the hours now approaching sober, teased the night and day back and forth between them. The hangover had the scent of two lovers, but it was just faint enough to catch the lips that now was speaking and purring soft whispers such as that on the phone, slowly sipping coffee. Just enough to open his eyes after tasting the beans that moments last had passed over her tongue. She kissed him. Strings of the chords from their passion remained on his tongue. He gave her a look that had passed between them several times over the bedroom affair that was now into its fourth season, unpromised seduction, unspoken between them. Unpromised seduction expected, but now there were two bodies holding one another's promises that suspended the rules every time they embraced. The kiss warmed as if they were still indulging. They lay together in the corpses of two exhausted bodies below two sets of eyes that had caught all the B-roll footage, the only functioning organs at the moment while they lay blazed from sex. He was always on cue, knowing her body, every inch as he did now. He ran the tips of his fingers up the backs of her hips into the inner thighs and up to the cusp of her vagina, loved as she reflexed with a slow, lean forward surrendering as he continued into the onset of sexually explicit invitations, answered. Things had gotten past a newly held memory afar from their ordinary plans, which landed them into the sheers and open air of the beachside seclusion, hid in a huge catacomb of honeymooners or couples who held an open affection and attitude towards sparing secrets. Sparing the blaze, the sparks still in the embers, flames and frames of the wood that seemed to catch the red and yellow hues when looking back at the flame. Time had come to designate. Ebony and Emissary shared the rest of the night together after a long afternoon. What had become of these wild casualties and unpromised days and nights, love that stole hours, days and the breath so many times before tonight? Was now the time to try to incorporate the formalities or keep the air above them open for further clouds that breezed with the wind and slow winding grinds? The touch of a lover's hands, the taste of his tongue, her perfume in the slight gesture of his head which turned sideways looking up at her bare, naked frame heading into the bath. Eyes followed by his body accepting all that was beckoning him to follow her occupation into the waters, deep ripples and a still, slow motion touching of her finger nesting his breast disappearing down his frame into the waters. Why close into the past all that the two had embraced? Into hours diminished by thoughts unsure of the hands, guilty hands of pleasure. Pleasure cared only to be selfishly a friend of lust and of coarse sex. If you never get to see beyond forever, know that what you forgot to see was all the love in sight, more than two hearts could share, more than the stare in each other's eyes, to know that someone would be there, if you closed your eyes and the reason you opened them was, because in the darkness that someone was there. If you never get to see beyond forever, know that what you forgot to see was all the love you left there, more than two hearts could share, more than all the reasons you need, more than all that you stand to bear, in the darkness face to face, you'd know, I'd be there, and if you never get to see, forever in your sight, what you missed, days that didn't close without one another, days that blend together, what you missed, passed you by, and it's forever, that I want you to know, if you never get to see forever, know that what you forgot to see, was all the love in sight. Amour. Love caught you cheating yourself. You was hiding from love. You can't amour. You told yourself, love, when I walked in the door, waiting to love you, waiting my turn. You can't hide from yourself anymore. Amour. I was there. Now you call on amour. Love don't care. Love me when I walk in the door. Now you tell yourself. Now you call on amour. Not to cheat you. You're not a cheater anymore. You say amour. Love you again. Once more. Love me. You still love me. Not to make you wait anymore. Amour. Never stopped you from loving me. Just you. Cheating yourself. Cheating me. Cheating love. Oh amour. To love you once more. Now you tell yourself. Jocelyn Shaw.